the Freecodecamp JavaScript algorithms and data structures cash register project. So we have this here, a function that takes 3 arguments. First argument represents the price of the item for sale. The second argument is the cash that the customer is paying you. And the third argument is a 2D array, which the 0th index, the first part of this array, is the name of the denomination, and the second is the total that you have in that compartment in your register of said denomination. So in this case, I have penny of $1.01, nickel I have $2.05, and so on and so forth. Okay, so the test is going to pass us different. It's going to pass us different things for the CID. And also it's going to change what the price in cash is, and we're going to have to return the correct results for that. And it wants the results in a form of an object over here with a status and a change key. Okay, so let's get to it. All right, the first thing we should know is that I saw some people online checking if what the customer is paying you is exactly equal to the price of the item, or if the customer is really in actuality giving you more than the item is worth. So we don't there's no need to check for any of that, because let's just assume for the sake of argument that if a customer is coming in and he's giving you exactly the amount of what an item is worth, there's really no interaction. You don't really need to open up your cash register in order to do that. It's an exchange that doesn't even require anything with the cash register if he gives you the exact amount. And let's also assume that for the sake of this, that the customer is smart enough not to try to pay you with something less than what the actual price is. Okay. So the first thing we need for this is, oh yeah, and I should also explain what this is, because this wasn't in the actual code that came with the challenge. This is an array, and I put a bunch of objects in here where the first key is the name, and this corresponds over here. Okay. So each one will correspond to the subarray. Each object corresponds to a subarray where it states how much the denomination actually is worth, because nowhere in this challenge do we know how much $100 is worth. Nowhere do we know how much 20 is, that the value of 20 is 20. Nowhere do we know that the value of 100 is 100. Nowhere do we know that the value of 10 is 10. So we also have to tell the computer that as well. Okay, so the first thing it gives us is this change variable. So what does the change represent? This is what we owe the customer, right? So if in this case we are paying with the customer is paying us with $20 and the value of the item is $19.50, so we're going to owe him change, that's our debt to him, is going to be 50 cents, right? So let's say that right now. So the first thing is the change. What is the change? Well, the change is actually, it's the cash subtract minus the price. Right? Because we're going to assume that the customer is giving us more cash than the actual price of the item. So that's what we owe the customer. Okay, that's pretty clear. All right. Next thing we're going to need is the challenge wants an object, right? I'm going to call that result. Object is going to have, it's going to have a status key and a change key. Status key is a string. And the change key is, for right now, it's going to be an empty array. And this is going to have subarrays where each one is going to be how much of a certain denomination I'm going to pay him back in order to make my change equal to 0. Okay? And also we should stress that you can only pay him with exact change. You can't pay him with more and assume that he's going to give you back change, or only exact. That's it. Or else nothing. Or else it's insufficient. Okay? So the next thing also we need to do is we need a sum variable. This is going to represent the sum of everything that I have in my drawer. This is going to be, when I add all this up, I'm going to add on to this variable over here. So I'm going to do that with a simple for loop, right? That's the length of this. The length of this third argument. start from 0. We're going to add all of these up. So we don't want to add all the strings over here. That's the 0th, the first argument. The first element in the subarray. We want to add the second element. So that's actually at 1, the index, because of the 1 off. What we're going to do is we're going to do sum CID equals by at 1. And let's right now, well, it doesn't matter if I have 2 return statements. The first one will hit, the second one will not. So let's just right now return some SID. Actually, no, let's not do that. Let's do it like this. Some SID. And I'm just going to copy this. See what happens. Okay, so I get a sum CID of this really weird number, and that's because of the way JavaScript handles floats, and we are going to have to deal with that, actually. Okay. So now that we have the total of everything in here added up, there's a few things, actually a few cases we can take care of right off the bat. So the first case is where if the total of everything you have, if it's actually less than what you owe the customer, you know right away it's insufficient funds, right? Because you don't have enough to pay him back. You've added everything up and it's not equal to what you owe him. So I'm going to just use object notation. Sorry, not rotation, notation. Object notation to equal this to the string that it wanted. What is that? Let's just double check what it wants. It wants insufficient funds. If it's insufficient funds, we're not really going to give this guy back anything, and we already have an empty array as the value of this change key, so we're just going to return that object. Sorry, not comma here. Okay, so that's the first case. The second case we can take care of right off the bat is if your sum of everything you have is exactly equal to your change that you owe this guy, it's our debt to the customer. If everything we have is equal, so what we're going to do is we're going to give him back everything that we have in our drawer. I want it to be closed because we've paid him back everything and we have nothing left. So we need to close our register until we get more money to restock our register, basically. And we're going to do results dot change. We're going to just give him back everything that we have in our CID. That's again this third variable, and let's just remind you guys again, it represents everything in here in this third argument over here. Okay. CID, and then we're going to return this results. Very good. Okay. So now we're going to get into the logic of what's going to happen if we don't have if it's not insufficient funds, if the sum of everything we owe is greater than what our change due to the customer, right? So then we're going to have to do some logic over here. So we need a value, we need a variable, I'm sorry, that is going to, this is going to be an empty array, and we're going to fill this with the denomination and the amount of the denomination that we're going to be paying back our customer in order to get our change variable equal to 0. So what does that mean? I'm going to explain. Everything will become clear. So also, you might have noticed that this object doesn't line up with everything here, because in other words, here we start with penny, nickel, and we're increasing in our denomination value. So penny, nickel, diamond, so on and so forth, up to 100. And this, I did the opposite of 100, 20, 10. So we need to reverse this so it lines up with the way it is over here, right? Because here it starts with 100, here it starts with penny. So we need to switch all that, right? So we're just going to use an inbuilt JavaScript method. JavaScript has this. Just reverse it. In another video, I'll explain there's all different types of ways to reverse arrays, and we'll go into that later. But for right now, we're just going to use the inbuilt method, right? Cool. Now, for the next part, right? So what we need to do over here, we're going to need a for loop, right? And this loop, what's going to do is it's going to run through this whole CID, right? And we're going to do a few things inside of it. So we're going to say I equals 0. I is less than the length of that CID. We'll do I plus plus. We need a variable, right? This variable is going to represent the value of each denomination that we're going to attach that into our subarray that we're going to pay back into our customer. So it's going to represent the second value in a subarray that's going to go over here. So this is going to have like one, say this will be pennies, and say we owe him 7 cents. So we're going to have, this first will be penny, and the value, this val is going to represent the second thing over here. So it will represent 0.07. You guys get the point of what it would be. That's the val. We're going to add to that. So let me get rid of that right now. Cool. The reason it's refreshing, well, you'll see why we set it to 0 inside of here. Okay. So right now what we want to do is we need a while loop. First, I'm going to write this out, and then I'm going to explain it to you guys what it exactly does. Okay, so first, this while loop, what it's going to do is it's going to go through all of these compartments, okay, which is the subarray. And the first thing it's going to check is that, and remember, by the way, it doesn't look like this because we've reversed it. So the first actual element is going to be the 100, and the second one is going to be the 20s, and then the 10s and the 5s. It's the opposite of this because of my reverse over here of what I've done. So first we're going to check that is $100 less than or equal to the change that I owe him, that I owe the customer, that my debt to the customer, right? Is that the value of that, right? So the denom I of value, so actually it's going to refer to this over here. The denom of I, we're going to start at the first iteration. So is $100 less than I owe him actually here 50 cents, right? So it's not, right? So this while loop will terminate, right? And then we're going to do some things afterwards, right? There's also something else we need to check in here, and that is that we actually have some money, some denomination, because I can't pay the guy back with something that with money that I don't actually have, right? So we're gonna have to check that, and the CID I of 1. That's this value right over here, right? This value. So we're gonna actually check that it actually exists, that I have it, right? Okay. So what are we gonna do inside of this while loop, right? So the first thing we need is basically we're going to do 3 things more or less, right? So the first thing we're going to do is that the CID I of 1 what that means is we're subtracting, right? So say we had 100 here, and which we don't. We're going to, in this case, we're going to skip over the hundreds, right? because the 100 will, this case of the while loop won't end up being true. It'll only end up being true when it gets to these quarters over here. Because if we owe him the change variable, which is what we owe him, is going to be 50 cents. So what it's going to see is it's going to see all of these values, right? So it's going to start with 100, 20, 10, 5, $1. And then it's only going to see that, well, a dollar is greater than, right? It's not less than our change, right? The value of a dollar is not, which is 1, is not less than the change, because 1 is not less than 0.5, right? But a quarter is less than 0.5, right? So once we get to these quarters, right, it's going to see that the quarter is less than 0.5, and we have some quarters, in our drawer, right? So we're going to subtract the value. So we're going to subtract 25 cents, and then we're going to subtract another 25 cents from this right over here, right? That's what we're going to do, right? And also what we need to do is, of course, need to subtract from our debt because we're paying him back. So that should decrease, of course. We're subtracting from our debt the value of our denomination, to be more exact, right? And also, we're going to add to this value variable adding to this value variable. This represents, again, I explained this before, but this represents the second argument inside of this new result array. So we're going to add that and give it back to him, right? So these are the three things that are basically going to happen inside of this while loop, right? The while loop terminating actually represents you advancing. Every time the while loop terminates, it represents advancing. It represents you checking the next. So I've basically I've paid him all. Say this was, say the quarters, okay, which in this case doesn't. Say I owe him $5, okay, and I don't have $5 of ones, right? Say there's nothing in the ones, okay, to pay him back, and I have $5 in quarters, so I'll pay him all back, right? And then I'm going to right after I pay him back, I'm going to advance to the next thing. That's what represents the while loop terminating. Okay, guys. So basically, after this while loop, what I need to check is basically the conditions of my while loop are no longer true, and that means I'm advancing to the next component in the register. So what I need to check is that my value variable has some amount in it. It didn't skip over necessarily and not pay anything, right? So if I have some amount, then what I need to do is I need to pay back the customer that amount. And I'm going to add this value to my new result array along with the name of the denomination that I'm going to be paying out, right? So if my value is greater than 0, I'm going to push to this new result. I'm going to push two things. First thing I'm going to push is at whatever iteration I am, the 0th, that's going to represent this string over here of whatever the denomination is. And I'm going to also add the value. That's what it wants. It wants a 2D array with a bunch of subarrays representing the change that I need to, what I need to give the customer in order to get my my change variable to 0. Cool. So now out here, there's also something I need to check, right? Basically, there is a possibility where I've paid him out. I'm like starting to add stuff to this new result array. So I'm starting to push values to it, and of course my change is decreasing, and I'm decreasing from the CID, and the change is what I owe the customer. It's decreasing, and I'm decreasing from the CID, but I don't get to an exact amount. And remember, we said before that I cannot pay him back any more than what I owe him, I can only, what do I mean by any more? What I mean by that is, say there's like a situation where I've paid off a certain amount, and then essentially like I have in my register more than what I owe him, right? So like I have more, and like I could essentially like use that money to pay him back, but the test doesn't want a check for such a thing. In other words, there isn't a case where I can pay him back more and then I'm going to assume that the customer is going to give me back that difference. That doesn't exist. It's either exact change or nothing, right? So basically that's what we're going to say. So if the change, right, if it didn't decrease to zero, right, if this hasn't gotten it all the way to zero, right, so if my change is greater than zero, it means I have insufficient funds. Insufficient funds. And then I'm just going to return my results, which will also be, it's going to return my results. Sorry. Return my result. And remember, my result, when it's insufficient funds, I've not really added anything to the change over here. Cool. So if after all this whole while loop, I've not decreased my change to zero, right? So all I'm going to just do is insufficient funds and give him back nothing. I'm sorry, customer, I can't pay you back. Come back and purchase this item another time. Hopefully I'll have enough change in my drawer to make you exact change. That's basically what that says. So what it means also, let me just clarify, it means is that I do have, I've said it before, but I'll just say it again. I do have more money in my drawer. I've added up my total of some CID is more than what I owe him, but it's not exact. So the last part of the challenge is basically saying that my change has the amount that I owe the customer, I have successfully decreased it to zero using the greedy method. And so what I'm going to do is, and I say greedy because I'm trying to pay back the customer with the largest denomination that I have, right, that is less than or equal to the change. So assuming that my change has decreased to zero, right, because this if condition won't hit. So what I'm going to do is everything is good and equals open. And I know it's open because I still must have some change in drawer, because if I don't have some change in drawer, and if I'm paying back exactly, this one would have hit over here. So I know that it's open, right? And I can change equals to new results. That's my new result variable right there, which is my 2D array. And I'm just going to return, not change, but I'm going to return my results. Okay, let's check it right now. This looks good to me. Let's see what happens over here. Is not defined. Okay, so that's this error over here. Declare that. Okay, so let's see. So these have all passed and these two did not. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is, I remember there's a problem over here. I'm not sure I explained it before, but let me just show you. So remember it says that my, I don't remember what it said over here, that this sum CID, I get some weird floating point number. It's because of the way JavaScript deals with floats. And I'm not going to get into this video, but in order to get the result we want, we're going to have to basically, inside of this while loop, we're just going to round it off, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do change change dot to fixed. We use 2 decimal places, right? Let's try it now. See what happens. Hold on one second. Let's get rid of this console log over here. Let's actually copy all this. Control A, Control C. Paste it on over here. Control A, Control V. Control S. Let's see what happens over here. Let's clear this. Let's see what happens. Let's console.log this. And we're going to do node register. Okay, so this is correct. So it's giving me, it wants a change of a quarter and the status of open, right? So what is the problem with this? Because I do owe him 50 cents, so that's what I'm giving him. So, okay, because it wants it to be a 2D array, and I have not, I guess I've not done that. I'm returning something that looks like this, so it doesn't like that. So how do I fix that? The way I fix that is I'll just do this. This should fix it. Right now, don't register. Ah, there we go. Okay. So let me see. Control A, Control C. Let's see if this works. A, Control V. Try this now. There we go. All right, guys, if you have any questions on this, just ask in the comments below, and I will, if anything's not clear, if I've made any mistakes, anything could be better, just mention it, and yeah, I will try to answer you guys all your questions. Okay, have a great day.